the members of one were not ma'arav with the other. And nevertheless, as we'll learn, there are certain Tanoim that will subscribe that at certain times you are allowed to carry kalim from one domain to the other. Like we mentioned, we're going to have a total of a three-way machlekes Tanoim. The shita of Rav Shimon is really quoted throughout Shas, the shita that we're going to learn over here. We're going to learn the difference between kalim that shashafsu b'toich habayis, in other words, when Shabbos began, they were in a house, versus the kalim that when Shabbos began, they were inside a chutzner. When they are in the house, then taking it from the house into the chutzner is never a problem if you're the only person who lives in that chutzner. But then taking it from one chutzner to the other will be more problematic, according to more Tanoim. Versus if that utensil began when Shabbos, by the Knisas Shabbos, already in the chutzner, a keli that was Shabbos in a chutzner, that is where, again, as we'll learn, some Tanoim are lenient, allowing that keli to be carried to another chutzner. We're going to have the shita of Rav Meir that we never spoke out until now, and that is that when you have a Reshus HaYachid, and in your Reshus HaYachid, let's say in your backyard, you have another Reshus HaYachid. What do I mean by that? Let's say you have a pillar, you have an amud that is 4 by 4 tefachim at least, and it's 10 tefachim high or more. Then Rav Meir holds you are not allowed to take something from your backyard and put it on that pillar, put it on that post, or from the post into your yard. It's yours and it's yours, as we'll learn his gezerah and how that will be related to dinam that we're learning about in the Mishnah. We're going to review the klal that nifratz b'meloyoy l'mekoyim ha'asur loy, that even if you are in an area where theoretically you should be allowed to carry in that area, but if this domain is completely open to a domain into which you may not carry, that prohibition extends backwards towards you, and you may not carry in your domain as well. We're going to have a very unique application of gud asik. Gud asik, again, is the opposite of what we have been learning about a mechitza that doesn't come all the way down. Right? That was the whole kula that we were learning about in the previous chapter, that certainly over water we are mekel, and we allow for us to consider the wall coming all the way down until the ground, into the water. Gud asik, which is the wall going up, is something that's even easier to apply. That's something that's regularly used now when you build a sukkah. However, we're going to learn a certain circumstance where there'll be a difficulty applying gud asik, and ultimately it's going to be a machlokes between Amiroyim. And finally, when you have two adjacent roofs and they are not similar, they're dissimilar. For example, one roof has a makkah around it, which implies that the person who's going to make use of it will have easier use to it because he's allowed to go there. There's less fear that he's going to fall off. And the adjacent roof doesn't have a makkah around it. And even according to the Tanoim that hold that you may not carry migag legag if you were not ma'arev, here you will be allowed to carry, because the one who has, so to say, regular usage will, so to say, even acquire the other roof, because the balabas of the other roof did not build a makkah, which means that he's not that interested in using it. It's not regularly used, and therefore the one who uses his regularly, ki'ilu, will be kaina all of the roofs and a lot more. We are again daf peites, all the way on top by the new Mishnah, by the new Perek, Kol Gadlus. Okay, says the Mishnah, Kol Gagoy So'ir. All of the roofs that are in the town, we're speaking about gagoys that are on top of homes. Each home is owned by a different person. We are specifically speaking about scenarios where these various balabatim were not ma'arav one with the other. Nevertheless, the Tanach of our Mishnah, which is Rav Meir, holds that all of the roofs are considered Rishus Achas, which would mean that if something, when Shabbos began, was on my roof, I'm allowed to carry it from my roof into my shachan's roof. We were not ma'arev. Yes, Shloim HaMelech made a takana that you have to be ma'arev between people when you go from one Rishus HaYachad that belongs to one individual to another Rishus HaYachad that has another ownership. You have to be ma'arev. Rav Meir limits that, right, to areas that are not similar. So from a house into a chatzir, from my chatzir to your gag, you can't do that if there's no eruv, if we did not make an eruv chatzirus. from my gag to your karpef. What's any Rishus Hayachid that has another name, it is only there that Shlomo HaMelech was Masakin, that you have to be ma'at of one shachin with the other whenever you are allowed to. There has to be a chaloin, there has to be a pesach, and if not, you cannot carry. But if you have Rishuyos Hayachidim that have the same name, a side of a house, if my house goes into your house, even though it's a bias and a bias, L'kula alma, that is the takana Shlomo HaMelech. You have to make a eruv chatzeros for me to carry from my window to yours. But it's from a gag to a gag, or even though the Mishnah doesn't mention, from a chatzer to a chatzer, or from a karpef to a karpef, you are allowed to carry. However, there's another nuance over here. Ubilvad shelo yehi gag gavoya yud oinamach yud divrei Rav Meir. If it's my gag, which is mamish touching, neighboring your gag, and my gag is 10 tvachim or more taller than yours, which also means that your gag is 10 tvachim or more lower than mine. It's called gag, but by the fact that they are on different heights, even according to Rav Meir, it's considered a different domain enough for us not to be allowed to carry migag legag if there was not an eruv chatzeros made amongst us. Okay, that's the sheet of Rav Meir. And I'm looking at the screen over here. I don't know if we need the picture, but okay, good. The Chachamim Oimrim, and this is the sheet that we regularly quoted. That was the takon of Shlomo HaMelech, that kol echad ve'echad reshus b'fnei atzma. I don't care if the gag is 10 tvachim apart or they're mamish adjacent. It's my gag and your gag. I know, midayit I can carry. Reshus hayachid to reshus hayachid. No, but it's mine to yours. My gag belongs to me. Your gag belongs to you. And the same thing is chatzir lo chatzir. The same thing is karpav to karpav. According to the Chachamim, we may never carry from one rishus to another rishus hayachid without the eruv chatzeros being made. Rab Shimon is going to be now the most lenient. All right, it's an interesting seder. We're going like to the medium, to the derech hamitzua. Rav Meir. Rav Meir says you can carry migag legag. But what Rav Meir is implying is that you may not carry migag v'chatzir. Has already a different name. Rav Shimon holds that the only problem is a bias. If you take the bias out, all the other reshuyos hayachidim, echad gagois, ve'echad chatzeros, ve'echad karpifos, are all called reshus achasein, meaning that if something, when Shabbos came in, that's the nuance. Even in this, Rav Shimon is going to have a limit. If something began in my bias, and when Shabbos came in, and I took it Friday night, Shabbos morning, Shabbos afternoon into my chutzner, now it's in my chutzner, even though Rav Shimon considers all of the shuis hayachid in the same, it may not be transported or carried from my chutzner to your chutzner, because this keli began Shabbos in my house. It's a keli that's connected to my house. Rav Shimon holds that the whole takon of Shlomo was only for house articles. But if when Shabbos came in, the keli was outside my house, whether it was in my gag, whether it was in my chutzner, whether it was in my outdoor enclosed area, it may be transported without eruv chatzeros. Not only from migag legag, from my gag to your chutzner, from your chutzner to someone else's karpef. I don't care if it's 10 tvachim, it doesn't make that differentiation. That's only Rav Meir. Rav Shimon is by far the most lenient one. Again, the only limitation he has is that if the keli was shoyves babayis, then it can't go further than the. Now, from my house to my chutzner, there's no problem. We do that Baruch Hashem the whole time. You have a home, you can take things outdoors. That's because it's all yours. But the moment you are changing ownerships, if it began b'chutzner, it can go anywhere, but not in someone else's house. Again, it can go into gag l'chutzner to karpef, to someone else's gag, to someone else's chutzner, but leave the houses out of it. Only lekelim sheshafsu l'toichan, for kelim that began in either a gag chutzner or karpef, or lekelim sheshafsu b'soy chavayis. This is the three-way machlokes. And again, normally, whenever we speak about the takon of eruv chatzeros, we mention the sheet of the Chachamim. But now we learned Rav Meir is a bit more lenient, and Rav Shimon also was quoted so many times. We already had Rav Shimon quoted in Rav Eliezer the Milan Shabbos, and here in ERUVIN a few times. Rav Shimon is the real matir. Okay, says the Gemara. Yosef Abaye Barovin and Rabbi Chanina Barovin. These two Amoraim were sitting, and they were going to be discussing now Shitas Rabbi Meir, and they were having this discussion in the presence of Abaye. Yosef Abaye Gabayu. Now, before Abaya opined, first the Gemara records their conversation. They were saying the following: Bishlam and Rabbanon, who hold, right? It's simple that Kishem Shedi Yoirim Chalukin Lamato, right? Let's speak about a Gag. Each Gag is over a home, my house and your house. Since it's owned by different Yoirim, which is Lakula Alma, if I want to carry something from my house to your house, Midrabanan, I can't do so without the aid of Chatzeris. So who cares if it's downstairs, if it's on the roof? Now, I know that we don't live on a roof the same way we live in a house, but who cares? It's my house, it's your house, it's my roof, it's your roof, different owners. That's the whole Nakuda of the aid of Chatzeris. But according to Rav Meir Micah Savar, what's bothering him is this 10 tvachim. So let's be consistent. So then Rav Meir should not allow to carry it from a Gag legag. Right? So so it must be that Elo, obviously that ain't chalukin, that when you look in the perspective of a Gag, not to that Shlomo HaMelech was addressing. A Gag is already an area that people don't really live in it, and you can carry migag legag. So why does Rav Meir, and why is that? Oh, and why would he say that? L'chura, the chol l'maylo miyud, the shus achasi, because b'chlal, anything that's above 10 tvachim, which is where a Gag is, automatically is considered one domain. How this is explained al pi nigla, I don't know, al pi chasidus, this is gavaldik. Right, l'maylo miyud means that you are in the shus of the Eibishter, in the shus hayachid. But coming back over here, so if that's the case, afilu Gag gavoy asor of a nomuch yud, nami. Who cares if the height of one roof vis-a-vis the other is off, higher, lower, by 10 tefach? How does that change anything? So what? A Gag is l'maylo miyud tefachim. A Gagin b'fnei atzmon is considered reshus achas. So why would that make a difference? That's the kash. So that's what they were wondering. They needed help. Abaye overheard the question. Amalu Abaye, Oy shemiya l'chu hada amar avitzchak bar Avdivi. Did you not hear? No, well, you should have known. What should have you known? Statement of Tanoim, we have to know. That Omer Hoyer Rav Meir constantly said that Kol Makaim Sha'ata Moitza Shtei Reshuyos, whenever you have two areas, two distinct areas, two Reshuyos, even owned by the same person. Imagine this. Veheim Reshus Achas. It's in one domain. I'll give you an example. Rav Meir gives an example. You're going, Amud, if you have a post in your backyard, that the post itself is high 10 tvachim, v'rachav dalit, it's wide 4x4. Even if this post would have been in a karmelis or in a reshus harabim, the top of the post is already a reshus hayachid. Now in this case, side by side, you're in your backyard. Since it is a separate reshus hayachid, Rav Meir has a chumrah, asur lekatav olav. Can you imagine you in your backyard? Not only can you not put something on there, even if you don't want to mamish place something there permanently, if you simply want to use the top of the post to help you straighten out your backpack, it means the backpack is still strapped to your shoulders, you're just leaning on it, you're making some use of it by placing something there momentarily. Rav Meir holds midrabana on it also. Why is that? Because mishum teil b'reshus harabim, since this type of standalone post is something that is relatively common, and if it would be in a reshus harabim, because of its dimensions, it becomes a reshus hayachid. Such a post with reshus hayachid, of course, also lekatav olav midoraisa, because you are in the reshus harabim. If you're going to lean your backpack on top of the post, you're making a hanacha for reshus hayachid. So, in order for people to remember, you can never do that in a reshus harabim. He made a fence. You may not even use it in your backyard. In other words, Gag, according to Rav Meir, my Gag and your Gag is called one reshus. The issue of it being 10 tvachim higher than the other, it's not because it's my Gag and your Gag. Forget about that. Even if it's my Amud in my backyard with Rav Meir, I can't make use of it. So hachinami gzeira mishum teil b'reshus harabim. Okay. So now says the Gemara that when these two Amoraim, right, Abaya bar Ravin and Hanina bar Ravin, when they heard this from Abaya, so Sabur Mina, they thought originally that this Gezeda that they never heard about of Rav Meir isn't dafka about putting something on a post. Let me give you common things that people had in their backyards. They had a machteshes, they had a mortar. We don't have these kalim that often. You can say you have a swing set, but let's speak about a mortar. According to Rav Meir, a mortar is a keli that you can move. That's the nakuda. Or if you have a gigas, you have a barrel. People had barrels. Barrel is also something that's not fixed in its place. And the typical dimensions of these kalim were at least 4 by 4 tvachim and at least 10 tvachim tall. So does Rav Meir also hold that you may not put anything down on that machteshes or on that gigas in your backyard? So Amar Lahu Abaye. Oh, this, you heard the word of Rav Meir. From Rav Meir's words, it's not clear. I understand where you're going. However, Hachi Amar Mar, this is what the master says. Who's the master of Abaye? Rabba. Rabba was his teacher. Rabba was his father. Rabba was his teacher. That Loi Amar Rav Meir Ela Amoid. He only made this gezerah by an amud, by a post, or Ba'amas Harichaim. Ba'amas Harichaim is the bottom millstone. Articles that are kavua b'mekoimam. Hoil v'adam keveil ha'makoim. In other words, since people assign them to a fixed place, no one is saying that you can't move an amud. It doesn't have to be cemented in with a double seal. But something that is placed be'oifen, that you meant to keep it there, you mean to keep it there, only there does he have a stakon. And by the way, same thing with a gag. A gag for sure. A gag is already mechuber to the bias. But just the limit, Rav Meir wasn't that machmir by any standalone keli, since it doesn't have in a fixed place. No, what's the whole gezerah? Tail b'reshus harabim. People don't leave in a reshus harabim a barrel. You're not allowed to do that. That's called putting a boir b'reshus harabim. So something that's not common in reshus harabim is something for which you don't have to make a gezerah when that is in a reshus hayach. Okay. Final question, says the Gemara on this sheet of Arei, Koisel Shubein Chatzeiros. We had this case above. And the Koisel is Kavua, Mamish Kavua, like a Gag. And Amar Rabbi Yehuda, this is the Amoira, that Kishatim Soloimar. Sometimes Kishatim Soloimar is a Imtim Soloimar. Here, Imtim Soloimar means the Maskana, that if you, right, if you're gonna make a careful analysis, you will chap that ledivrei Rav Meir gagen reshus la'atzman, even though that's clear. But really, Rav Meir only used Gag as an example. But likewise, chatzeres reshus la'atzman, same thing he said by a Gag goes to a chatzer. From my chatzer to your chatzer, I can carry, according to Rav Meir. Rav Shimon is even more matir because he allows from my Gag to your chatzer. But according to Rav Meir, if it has the same name, it's considered reshus achas, and kapeifa is reshus la'atzman. And what does that mean when we're speaking about every chatzit? Every chatzit is shus la'atzman. We're speaking about there's my chatzit and there's your chatzit and there's a wall in between. And Rav Yehuda is saying that Rav Meir shita will be that I can carry from my chatzit to your chatzit. Now, guys, by Gagin, at least then you didn't have walls separating my part of the roof to your part of the roof. It was one big block, though. You can walk the whole Union Street on the roof. By chatzeres, people put fences. Hezekriya, everyone had a fence. So if Rav Yehuda is saying that Rav Meir Shita also goes to neighboring chatzeros, how would I carry from mine to yours? Over the wall. Over the wall, many times, I would put something on top of the wall. That's the way people carry it. You don't throw it over. And then from the top of the wall down. But if you're telling me that this concept of a Gag being 10 tvachim higher or lower is not unique to a Gag, it's connected to the general takana that even in my backyard, anything she'adam keveya makim lahem is something upon which you may not do a hanacha, even though it's yours. So how can you say my love doesn't Rav Yehuda mean that Rav Meir is being mated the sharing with taltuli derech koisel, which is again when I have a wall separating my yard to your yard. If you tell me I can carry from mine to yours, yeah, sometimes I'll throw, sometimes I'll put it on top. And Rav Yehuda should have at least clarified that will be us. And according to Rav Meir, is it not usher? So how do you reconcile that? So the Gemara says, no, according to Rav Meir, it's going to be usher to put it on top of the wall. Amar Rav Huna, Bar Yehuda, Amar Rav Sheishes. Boy, Rav Yehuda wasn't telling you that you can put it on top of the wall. Rav Yehuda is speaking about a scenario where there's a Pesach in between my chatzit and your chatzit. And as we learned before, a Pesach doesn't oblige us to make an Eruv together. If you have a Pirza, then all of these Tanoim will agree. In one chatzir, everyone has to be ma'arav together. In one chatzir. If you have two different chatzeros, we learned in Perek Chaloin. If you have two different chatzeros, even if there is a chaloin or a pesach, it's not machayev them tima ma'arav together. Rotzu ma'arav, everyone lives from yatzim, and that's the case. And on that, Rav Yehuda is telling you that Kishatim Solaimar, Rav Meir over here is not only Gag. Rav Meir says Gag is one category, Chatzit is another category, Karpev a third, and everyone can carry as long as the Keli was shoyvis, Bachatzit or Bagag or Bakarpev, then you can carry from one Karpev to the neighboring one, even though no Erev was made.
So if you and I live next door and we have no Erev Chatzeris, as long as the stuff's in the yard, we're going to carry between each other, according to Reb Meir.
As long as when Shabbos began, it's in the yard. Just add that nuance. Because don't forget, that's possible that when Shabbos began, it was in my house. I carried it to my yard. And then that even according to Rav Meir, may not be carried. Even according to Rav Shimon, cannot be carried from my yard to your yard. Correct. In the Chanami. Okay. Says the Gemara, they're the most machmir, that kol echad ve'echad reshus bifnei atzmai. You may not carry migag l'gag. Obviously, if they made an Erev Chatzeris, you could. The Erev Chatzeris resolves everything. Okay. Now, Itmar, we learned, Rav is speaking l'shitas chachamim, that ein metaltalin boy ella b'daladamis psanayazach, that you chap. Now that we established that if it's my gag adjacent to your gag, the shitas chachamim I may not carry. So based, like Rashi reminds us, 7 lines under the Gemara, there's a concept called nifrat b'maloi l'makayim ha'asar. Remember that? In other words, if I'm on my gag and I am not allowed to carry from my gag into your gag, so what happens automatically is I cannot even carry in my roof. Divrei Torah, it's called Aniyim b'makam echad v'ashirim b'makam echad. Rabbeinu HaKadosh didn't have to write it because he expects us to remember it, but you have to put things together. Now, this doesn't affect the chatzit because the chatzit has some sort of kaisel normally between my chatzit and your chatzit. If there's b'chlal no wall, then we have to make an eruv. Then not making an eruv doesn't even allow me to carry from my house into my yard because someone in the chatzit was not ma'arei. But Gagin, there was no walls. So says Rav. Shmuel, everyone agrees that nifrat b'maloy l'makayim ha'asar loy doesn't even allow you to carry in your domain. However, guys, listen to this. Every house has walls. We keep on speaking about that. Maybe good nachis is Gideon boy. At least not according to Rabbi Yossi, according to the other Tanoim. But good asik, everyone holds of good asik. So let me ask you a question. Why don't we say good asik? What's the good asik? Think about a house on Union Street. There's a wall that separates the two houses. Now that wall is completely under the ceiling, avada under the roof. You don't see any of that wall on top, but there is a wall underneath the ceiling, the roof, that is separating my house from your house. If we were to apply gudasik, then halachically there is a wall that's separating my gag from your gag. So it's not nifratz b'maloyoy, it's completely closed off. Now, Rav agrees to gudasik, but Rav does not apply gudasik where you can't b'chlal see the wall. Where would you be able to see the wall? Let me explain to you what I mean by seeing the wall. Rav doesn't need for the wall to go up psat tefach. If you have the houses that are not, I don't know the word in English, it's not a Union Street house. It's not mamish touching. If the houses are very adjacent, but if you stand by the edge, you can look down and you can see the outside wall of the house. Even between my house and your house, there's a hairbreadth. That's even Laraf called a visible wall. Even though when you're standing on the roof, you don't go to the edge, you won't see it. It's called visible. You can see it from the gag. But if it's adjacent homes, you can't see it at all. So Rav doesn't agree to Godasim. That's a Gamal Dika Machlekes. Back in English. Shmuel Amar, Muta L'talta L'kuloi. We'll look inside the Rashi, 5 lines from the bottom. Muta L'kuloi, because Shemechitzois, Hamavdilois, Lamata. What does the Bach say? Bain, he adds, Hadiyoidin, Omrinun, Good, Askino, Lamaila, and V'yafidu B'neim. Gavaldik. Back in the Gemara. Says the Gemara, B'mechitzois, Hanikoris, to call Amalek Pligi. Like I just explained, mechitzas anikoros. Rashi says 3 lines before the bottom. When is it nikoros? Not that you can see it from any place of the roof. As long as she'ein abatim mechubarim, if the houses are not mechuber, which means there is some avir beinehem, which means that when you stand at the edge of the roof, when you look down, you see the outer wall of your house. Even according to Rav, of course, you say gudasik, and you are allowed to carry on your gag. But like Chachamim, you can't carry from your gag to your neighboring gag. There was no eruv, but you can carry on your gag. Back in the Gemara, keep pligi. Mechitza and the card is called like pligi. That we say gudasik. Keep pligi the mechitza she'ein nikarois. Here is Rav Amad ein mitchaltelin boy elamadal damois. As you can only carry in a rishus harabim or an economist or in a carpe, look at ladira, which is more than base sign, only within 4 amos. Because loy amad good asik mechitza, because you cannot, from any vantage point of that domain that you are in, see any part of the mechitza. Shmuel Amar, yes, mutal talta b'koloi, because we say that good asik mechitza, and therefore it's not nifratz b'maloyoi l'mekoim ha'asur loy gaval. Then you can carry your own gag according to the Chachamim. Very good. So now the Gemara is going to try to bring a proof, a siyua to Shita Shmuel, which would be a kasha on Rav. Kanan, we learned in our Mishnah, Chachamim kol echad v'yechad. Chachamim is referring to Rav Meir. Kol echad v'yechad means every single roof, every single gag, daf peitasum and beis, is considered a reshus le'atzmai. You know what that implies? Reshus le'atzmai, like Rashi says, l'chayda, that implies you can't carry to your neighbor. Rav Meir says you can carry to the neighbor. The Chachamim say no, you can't carry to the neighbor, which l'chayda means, but at least you are allowed to carry on your own gag. Right at the top of Rashi. There is an implication in that. Every time Chazal say you are in your own reshus, okay, I can carry in my own reshus. So but according to Rav Kasha, the implication seems to tell you that on the roof you may carry. So says the Gemara Amrei Beirav Nishmei Rav, the yeshiva bachrim in the yeshiva of Rav. They heard about this. They knew about this. They asked the Rav. So they're quoting Rav. What the Mishnah is implying, the Mishnah is never speaking about carrying daladams. The Mishnah is speaking about carrying less than daladams. Now, appreciate just putting together all the dinim that we learned until now. If my gag is neighboring your gag, even if I pick up something by the edge of my gag and I walk it over 1 amma or 2 ammas and I put it down on your gag, it didn't go 4 ammas. According to the Chachamim, this is asur. Why? Because I took it from one rishus hayachid to someone else's rishus hayachid. That same distance on my gag, even terav, is muted. Within daladamas, you can carry on your own gag. Since it's nifratz b'meloyim or asur loy, that means you can't carry more than daladamas. So yeah, you are making the correct implication. You can't carry megag legag, but you make carry on your gag. We're speaking about carrying it a very sagli gag. It means like talto beis amas begag zeh or beis amas begag zeh. And yes, and that may be done on your gag because you're sticking to within daladamas. Fragte Gemara weiter an Shitas Rav. The Amoyra Rabbi Elazar, who later moved to Eretz Yisrael, but ki having in the bubble. When he was in Bavel, he says that what? He also learned in the yeshiva of Rav. He learned in 7-7. He knew what they said over there. That ein metalkalin boy ela b'daladamas. He heard Shitas Rav. But Rabbi Elazar said, "Ani devei Shmuel kanu," but he found out that the yeshiva bachrim from Shmuel, they had a brais. That's a problem. No, he knew Rav says one thing, not machlekes Rav and Shmuel. Machlekes Rav and a Tana. Now, yes, Rav could be a Tano Palik, but according to Rabbi Elazar, it's already not an equal machlekes. The Vei Rav Shmuel Tanu ein lahem elo gagon. Again, and what does that imply? Ein lahem elo gagon, that under gag, the whole gag. My ein lahem gagon l'abdu shatad kulei. And we really try not to make it Rav Tano Palik. So again, doesn't that Braisa seem to go against Rav. And the Gemara wonders, I don't understand. We had an implication from the Mishnah, and Rav touched it. The same way Rav is going to einteichen the Mishnah, he can teich on the Braisa. So that's the answer. The answer is with the question, what? Umi alima mimas nisin? What is the Braisa more problematic? Is the implication more problematic than our Mishnah? That Rav himself already explained the Mishnah. That the Mishnah only is contrasting a short distance travel, a short distance transference, which yes, migag legag no, on the gag yes. And on your own gag, yes, you can carry within 4 amas. So the same thing that Rav explained to his yeshiva bachur, to Mei Rav, why the Mishnah is not problematic. So we say, hachinami, regarding the Braisa, beis amois begag zeh, or beis amois begag zeh. Okay. Now we are going to begin with the premise that Shita Shmuel that allows good asik to apply, even when the wall is bachlal, completely hidden from the eye, is something of a great chiddush. That's the premise. What we have is we're having so much in ERUVIN, how Rav Yosef at a certain moment got ill, and some of the illness affected his memory, and we see so many times how Abaya is reminding Rabbi Yosef what Rabbi Yosef himself taught. But up until now, to my memory, we never had Rabbi Yosef responding. Rabbi Yosef was happy that he was being reminded. Here we're going to have Rabbi Yosef making a statement. Abaya is going to remind him, and Rabbi Yosef is going to tell Abaya, you forgot what I said. Oh, so says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yosef, you know what? I never heard this conversation. Now, we'll see. He didn't hear Machlokes Rav and Shmuel, but he very much aligned himself with Rav. Like he wondered, wow, did Shmuel ever say? I never heard Shmuel making such a statement that you say good asik, even though you can't see the wall. So this is the classical. Amalei Abaya, respectfully, Rebbe, at Omrat Nihalon. You taught a Shita Shmuel, and he gave him details. And ve'aho Omrat Nihalon. That what? And he's quoting now a Mishnah we're going to have, God willing, in 2 days on 3 and Tzadik base. That God, Gadol, perfect picture. So God, Gadol means it's wider, and it's right adjacent to here in the whoever sees a picture to the Gag in the right, towards the right, which is narrower, and obviously there's no barrier separating one from the other. So Hagadol Muter, you are allowed to carry in the large Gag. Let's look inside Rashi. Let's look inside Rashi, 7 lines from the top of the Amid. Don't forget, guys, this is even Lashitas Rav. Hagadol Muter lekaltel boy the yoyden shaboy. People who live in the larger house can carry on their roof, not only in Daladamas, on the whole roof. Even Lerav. Why? What did we mention on the Amid Aleph? When you look over the house, you are able to see the mechitzas. Even Rabbis Moida that you say good asik. The hamechitza shalmata, right? The Kabbalistic words over here. That means when you look down, you can see the outer wall that extends the width of the gagadol. They are mechitzos hanikarising, and therefore we say the good askinu. Now, Chavre, I like that. Even though with the picture you have to make an imagination. Now see in your mind how walls come up. Now, if walls come up, that's another din that we learned. That when you have an area that needs, let's say, 4 mechitzas, let's say you need 4 mechitzas by a chatzah, but you don't have them fully covered, some of it is open. So we learned that if it's a breach that's more than 10 amas, that's already called a pirza, and that whole mechitza doesn't count. But as long as you have some wall on one side and some wall on the other side, if the opening in between is 10 amas or less, which is for sure the case by Gagois, we are presuming that it's not more than 10 amas, that's called a Pesach. So it's considered a closed-off wall. So even according to Rav, the outer walls of the house you can see when you stand by the edge, from all the sides. The only wall you can't see is when you have houses that are michubarim. But since the Godoil is protruding in both sides, as you can see in the picture, so you do have halachic walls, even when Rav Gudasik, on both sides, which means that the Gag Gadol is surrounded by halachic 4 mechitzas. Let's keep on reading in Rashi. The Is Lahu Gepufe, it's called side posts. This is halachic. You say good asics to create gepufe, moinedik. And therefore, v'hach pirza shekineged hakotan, it's open. Because again, lerav, you don't say good asik on that part of the outer wall that you can't see. Good, so there's no wall. Nevertheless, says Rashi, pischa havalagadol. It's called a pesach, meaning it's not a pirza, because it's not more than 10 amas. And therefore, the ein katal oisim olav. What's the whole issue, guys? Let's remember the issue is that nifratz b'maloyoy l'b'kaymo asrloy. That is what asers you're carrying on the roof. Here, it's not nifratz b'maloyoy. It's not nifratz at all. There is a halachic roof. Let's get back in the Gemara. However, the cotton is also because from the perspective of those who are standing on the roof of the cotton, let's go l'shitas Rab. You don't have any mechitza at all. You don't say godasik when you can't see the wall. So there's nothing coming up. They don't have any gepufe side posts. They have nothing. They're narrower. They're smaller. They're the cotton. So nifratz b'maloyoy l'makaymo asrloy l'shitas Rab. There's no problem because you can carry migag l'gag. Shitas chachamim, you cannot carry migag l'gag. The moment it's nifratz b'maloyoy, you can't even carry on your domain. Now, according to Rav, it fits. So just Shlem is reminding us that we had a big machloikis by a chutzit, that it's not enough to have on one side a side post. By a chutzit, you have to have from both sides. You remember we asked how large do they have to be? Do they have to be 4 tfachim? There were different shitas of how wide they have to be. Unlike, for example, by a mavui, that when you put the lechi, it can be as skinny as you want. It has to be high 10 tfachim. We learned that whole sugya. Now there's different shitas how wide they have to be. It has to be, that is the width. Okay. Now guys, all of this, versteht sich, only works l'shitas Rav. L'shita Shmuel, why would you not be allowed to go from the cotton to carry on the cotton? Right? Because according to Shmuel, you say good asik, you don't have to see the mechitzas. And this is what Abaya is reminding his teacher Rabbi Yosef. V'omanat lon Allah. When we learned this Mishnah, you Rabbi Yosef taught us that Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel that lo yishanu ela sheyesh diyorin hazeh v'diyorin hazeh. No, it's for this to fit in Shita Shmuel is only if people are properly living on each roof. How does that affect anything? I'll tell you how that affects everything. Just like we learned above. Not Rabbi Yosef, but to make the mechitza come down over land. What's the problem? Gedoyim boikim boy. You're making a halachic wall, but if there's animals that are constantly going through the wall, no one can walk through a wall. That's mevatel, the good nachis. When people live on both roofs and they're going back and forth, their going back and forth is trampling on the wall. In other words, this is all to make this Mishnah not refute Shmuel. Really, Shmuel holds good asik. If people would not be living there, now how do you define that? We're not going into right now. People sometimes make use. People sometimes can walk, but it's not something common. Shmuel says, no, even the cotton. The reason why the Mishnah does not allow for you to walk on the cotton is because you don't have that wall at all, because people are living in it. Because the Havilah had the cotton, look into these Gavaldic words. The Gedoyim Boikim by people are familiar with. Very few people have this. This is written once. Mechitza nidreses. The fact that people are walking from my gag to your gag to the other, they're breaking the wall. Avol Shmuel said, Ein diyorin al zeh v'al zeh, shnei mutarim. In other words, Rabbi Yosef was the one that introduced to us. Abaya said, you taught me, the sheet of Shmuel, that we say gudasik. But don't forget, you only need that to fartay Shmuel. So you taught us that din. So he's reminding Rabbi Yosef. So here, again, very rare. Rabbi Yosef tells Shmuel, in this case, you forgot, not I. Amar later, Rabbi Yosef tells Abaye, I'm sorry. I remember what I told you. What I told you was, regarding this entire Mishnah, not to what you're quoting. This entire Mishnah is only the whole Mishnah that Tzaddik Beis is speaking about that there is actually, guys, a physical mechitza surrounding both roofs. If you have a picture, you can show the picture. This is the normal case when you have like we have my two chatzeros, and you have, we learned so much about the larger chatzir and the narrower chatzir. Yeah, here you have physical gepufe. Forget about, there's no good asik needed over here. The Gadol Mishnah Bigifufei, like we mentioned, because since when you're standing in the larger area, looking into the smaller area, you have on both sides a mechitza. And again, the opening is not more than 10 amas. It's called a Pesach. The cotton is now nifretz b'meloyoi. This is what Rabbi Yosef is telling Abai, what I told you. Avol ein mechitza loy al zeh v'loy al zeh. Shneim are asurim. Because Rabbi Yosef is saying that we will never say, listen to this, good asik mechitza, not like Shmuel. We don't say good achas mechitza when you can't see any of the wall. And let's go more. Hold on, but at least you can see the edges. So why don't we consider that the sides of the edges, which you can look down to, and we said on Amud Aleph that even Rabbi's Moida, the mechitzos hanikoros does not have enough halachic power to create the side posts. Wow. Because when you have mechitzos hanikoros and you can see the whole wall, yeah, that's called the mechitza. But in our case, how much of the wall can you see, even from the Gadol's perspective? Not the whole wall, only the sides. You can't make that into a wall and then use the leniency. They're side posts, so it's called a Pesach and not a Pizza. You don't do all that, even Larav. And therefore, if I get to Rabbi Yosef says, when I learned this Mishnah, not only did I never hear of Shmuel, I never heard of a shita that allows you to say good asik when you bechlal cannot see the walls. I don't even allow you in this case to use good asik on the sides of the building. And I taught you that the ganze Mishnah is speaking about Dafke, that there's a physical wall surrounding both roofs. How great is that? Says Abaya, it's amazing. You know, when you remember, sometimes people are moidi, it could be, but I remember you said that word. That word you said. So Abaya says, but I remember that you mentioned something about people living on it. According to what we just said right now, that Rabbi Yosef made it clear that the Mishnah Daf Tzadik Beis is speaking about a physical fence, a makkah around the roof. Why would he mention anything about the Yodim? It's not Negeya. And Abai says, this I remember about the Yodim to Amrat Lon. So says Rabbi Yosef, okay, I don't remember that. It's amazing. But I'll tell you what I must have meant. That if indeed I told you that, so the first thing that you said, I know I did not say. If I mentioned the Yodim, Hachi Amri Lachum. That loishanu elo sheyesh mechitza ru'uya ledira azeh or ru'uya ledira azeh. Coming back, that's the way I was wording the need for there to be a physical mechitza on the roof. Because my friends, when there isn't a mechitza on the roof, which is the whole mitzvah of makkah, people de facto don't live there. It's dangerous. That's what I meant. That the roofs are ru'uya ledira. Only then the gadol nishri be gefufei. Because there's physical gefufei. Again, that was the chiddush of Rabbi Yosef. You don't say good achas mechitza, even though you can see the mechitza looking down the side of the house. For that mechitza to be strong enough to create gefufei, to say, the rest is a Pesach. You don't say that. You need physical walls. Avo, okay. So then the gadol mishneh be gefufei, the cotton difference when aloyoy. Avol yesh mechitza ru'uya ledira al hagadol. What happens if there is a mechitza? Another detail now. What happens if there's a mechitza surrounding the larger roof? But ve'ein ru'uya ledira ala cotton. But you can't. But there is no mechitza around the small roof. What does that mean, my friends? Look at this new din over here. That means that de facto, people that live in the smaller house will use their roof much less. People that live in the large house, they use their roof, and they look over to the neighbor, and who's there? No one. You know what we say? Even lachachamim. In this case, you could carry migag legag. Afilu cotton shari live b'nei gadol. In other words, the cotton's roof may not be used at all because you're carrying in an area that's nifratz b'maloyoy l'makayim ha'asrolay. L'makayim ha'asrolay. That's the beginning of today's shiur because lachachamim migag legag is called different rishuyas. Now we're saying a final nuance. That not only does Rabbi Yosef tell Abaya, the Mishnah Daf Tzadik Beis is speaking about a fenced roof, but now the final thing we're learning today, and we're going to repeat this two more times now, that whenever you have two reshuyos, lachachamim, you would have to make an eruv. But if one is using that reshus and the others don't, then the ones who make use of theirs are allowed to carry to the neighboring rishus, even though they did not make an eruv. No one is walking on the cotton. No one is using the cotton. Since no one is using the cotton, let's use the words of the Gemara. My Tama, the Shlomo, look inside the Gemara. That's a good picture. If you can see, if you can have the picture. It's not such a good picture. You can't see that good enough over here. No, it's the large roof has a roof, has a makkah. The small house has nothing. The very fact that the people that live in the smaller house are not making mechitza, what are they doing? Saluke, saliku, nafshayu mehachi. It's keilu. They give up their rights. For whom? Lebnei gadol. Lebnei gadol. Because they know, my neighbors, they use their roof. What do you think happens? That's what happens. The Metzias, if you use your roof and I use my roof, I'll have more respect. If I know my neighbor never uses this area, we're speaking about a gag, you won't even know that I'm there. You end up spilling over in there. And that has an effect. Oh, that's the picture. And that has an effect that even l'chachomim you can use it. Now the Gemara is going to substantiate this logic. So first of all, what we have over here, listen, guys, we're not saying Shmuel didn't say what he said. Rabbi Yosef never heard that before. So the most makel is Shmuel, who says you say good asik even though you can't see the mechitzas. Rabbi Yosef holds the most chamor, that even when you could see the mechitzas, if you can't see the whole mechitza, you can only see the sides, it does not create the side posts. And now this third din, which is a kula l'shitas chachamim, and let's learn this and applied in another scenario. Says the Gemara, you know what? This is like Rav Nachman. What did Rav Nachman say? That if asa sulam kavua legaga, it's something similar. It's not about having a fence. It's about how do people get to roofs. Today have staircases. They didn't have staircases. They would have a ladder. So if one house had a sulam kavua, we learned that before. It doesn't have to mean that it's cemented into the ground. It means that it's a heavy ladder. Then, and the other people did not put any ladders going into their gagin. Again, this is just a mitzias, not a halacha. That the one who has access will make a lot more use relative to the others. Zok says Rav Nachman, same concept. Hutar b'chol hagagin kulam. Like Rashi says 2 lines under the Gemara. Hutar kol hagagin zok Rashi. Ba'afilu l'Rabbanon, not Rav Meir. Gag legag is not rishus achas. The Kivin, right, 3 lines under the Gemara. The inu loyavatzulam. The other ones did not make a ladder. So that's the words that we borrow from the Gemara about saliku nafshayu. First, it's like 2 steps. They remove themselves, and the achlinu, they were moichel. They're moichel. Okay, that's the way of the world. When you move out of your territory, I move in. That's the way it goes. Okay, back in the Gemara. And Amar Abaye, this is all to back up. So first, Abaye is hearing something. It's Abaye. Okay, Abaye forgot. But now that Abaye heard this din, says Abaye himself a similar case. That Bona Aliyah al Gabi Beisoi, a picture will help. So we're a bunch of neighbors. We all have roofs. But then the Gevir went ahead and he built a second story on his roof. Now, he's not building it on the neighbor's roof. But what happens if he builds a small entrance which will allow him to walk out? Very good picture. So guys, take a look. Here you have, let's say, 4 houses. So the Gevir over here in the right corner at Gebayt, the second story. Now, the way he would get to his roof was from in the house. They would have in the middle of the Aliyah, they would have a opening, and they would have a ladder. He built a door. Now, in this picture, where does the door go out to? It goes out to the neighbor. Oh, it's not his roof. But look how much easier access he has now to the roofs other than all the other people. They don't have such an access. Here, he opens his door and he has this huge rooftop. Same concept. Says Abayim. Bon Aliyah al gabe beisi, but also lefanel dakar. Arba, and guys, arba is never, arba means without a hay is 4 amas. It doesn't have to be 4 amas. It's a mistake. Even if the door is small, it's avad if he builds a proper door. That means he has even easier access. Even if the door is 4 tvachim, I want you to squeeze out of 4 tvachim. before the cholent might fit. So no, the fact that he has easier access to all of the roofs, even lachachamim, even when he made no eruv, hutar lebechol hagagen kulam. Because again, what is he being? He's being megala. Everyone knows he built a door. Everyone knows it. If I, who live in the neighbor, if I would not want for my guy, I would tell him, I'm sorry, this door is not kosher. So it's people, you have to protect your rights. Not protecting your rights there's some responsibility on the party of the one who is basically seeing that people are using his domain and he's not being protesting. He'll use it much more. Oh, Amar Rava. Rava says that I like what you're saying, but I don't like the way you worded it, because you are saying if he made a door, okay, it depends where the door is facing. Sometimes making a door won't give him permission. Hey, chidami. So he says, here a picture that if the avida lahabi tarbitza lebesa, he's giving an example that the guy that lives on the right downstairs planted a garden, and he built. I like in this picture, he made the Aliyah. He made his upstairs much bigger, but that's a mistake in the guy who made the drawing. He made in his corner. Let's say there were four. In the prior picture, there were four houses. He built a second story. Sometimes you build a door not to be able to go on your neighbor's gag. If you see a picture, you'll see. You build a door in a different direction. It's going over the end of your gag, not facing the neighbor. And you can see that he built the gag to be able to look down that the kids are playing properly. Or here, the example is that you have a tarbitza, you have a garden, and you want to have an aerial visual to your garden. But you see from the door what the kavanah was. So Rabbi says in that case, the Amar, Daf Tzadik, the neighbors would not have protested, because if the door gives the appearance that he only built a door not to krich around on my roof, he only did it for him to overlook his garden, such a daka does nothing. Rav is not arguing with Abaya. He just wants for Abaya to elaborate more, because the nekuda that we have both from Abaya and from Rav Nachman, and ultimately coming back to Rav Yosef, is the final thing we're learning today. That even l'chachamim, that gag l'gag are to the shuyas. And we're speaking, just understand, guys, we're not speaking about a chutzit. None of what we're learning is about a chutzit. A chutzit, if I don't happen to use my chutzit that much, it has no effect. People then, the living was indoor, outdoors. It always was that way. The sizes of the homes of Chazal were substantially smaller than now. You can't imagine how little the houses were. People used their outdoors. So if one person was bedridden and the neighbor is using his chutzit, that's not significant. We're speaking about gagin. Gagin were not that commonly used. It wasn't like today. So in such a scenario, by a gag, if someone, like we said, has a sulam kavua, if someone built a makkah around their roof and the others didn't, if someone has a door facing the neighboring gag, then two things, these two steps like Rashi. The neighbors were mistalik themselves, and they were moichol, and even lachachamim, you need not have an eruv chatzeros, and you are allowed to carry even over there. God willing, to be continued.
Rabbi, happy birthday.
Yes.
Rabbi, in these last cases, the one with Abaya where he had an opening to go out to the roof, what happens if the other owners have a regular sulam, like a fixed ladder that enables them to get up? So it's not as easy as the guy that has the second floor.
I don't know what you're asking, Danny. What happens if it's a Pesach versus a sulam?
Correct. If they both have it.
Now, if they both have, then for sure he can't carry. So you were asking if one guy has the door and one guy has a ladder.
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying the other neighbors have ladders to get to their roofs, which is hard to access.
Then he cannot carry. They were not mistalik themselves.
So the only reason it works in that area is because the other people have no entrance.
Have no easy access. No easy access. Correct. No fixed access. People always have access. They can put a ladder on Shabbos, but they don't have easy access. Correct. All right, guys. Gewaldig. But you see, like these, the Gemara is easy. If you don't have a picture,